Thank you so much for joining in. And
Pleasure, total
such
pleasure.
an such an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. Ms. Niyatii Shah, who's an experienced sexuality educator and a parenting and an intimacy coach since 15 years. She's a current president of Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is skilled and a strong and a passionate professional as a trained sex educator focusing on sexuality education and health. So apart from being an author of sexuality education books for preteen girls and boys, Ms. Shah is also a global goodwill ambassador India for human rights advocates, sexual harassment, gender inclusion, guilt-free parenting. So Niyatii, seriously, you're giving me chills that so much you've done in this field, and we're so lucky to have you here. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for this elaborate introduction. Sex education is a field not a lot of us are covering, and I'm glad day by day we have more and more people talking about these topics. And I'm just lucky to have started early. I started as a mother, obviously, but I'm glad I started it early, almost 12 years now, and I've been able to do things which probably most of us don't get an opportunity. So I feel extremely blessed to be able to have all these platforms, under my experience. So very, very humble and very blessed here. But I think even couples or even older people, even women and men who are going through their, late 50s, I think all of us require some help in the field of sex and sexuality. Newly married, 20 years married, 30 years married, not married, dating, all of us require sexuality education at some point in our life, and probably many different points and different education. But yes, I also believe strongly in educating the younger ones, because if the roots are taken care of, the tree, the branches, the leaves, and the fruits, we will not have to really worry about. That we are worrying about our generation today, So that was my reason to start with the children. And of course, being a mother of 2 young children at that point also, it was an easy journey for me to begin with.
No, I completely agree with you on this, Niyatii, that, that's true that every age needs this education as well as support and the right guidance at some stage of time. But yes, if we take care of this at the very beginning of, those early years of kids, we expect them to be better humans with respect to their sexuality and sexual health. So definitely, very, very true. So with this, I think, let me ask you, I have 2-3 questions, but yes, let it be a very impromptu chat. So let's keep on adding things. We have around 30 minutes of yours. So cool.
Surely.
So Niyatii, it is a very important question, I would say, which pops up in all the parents' mind for sure, because most of us don't know what exactly is sexuality education. And
yes,
there are a lot of myths behind these 2 words, sexuality education. So we would love to hear from you that what exactly is sexuality education, and does it really teach how to actually have sex to kids, or it is something beyond what we think actually?
So traditionally, it all started also as sex education, wherein a lot of educators were talking mainly about contraceptions, family planning, sexually transmitted diseases. But because that was the problem then, that is what they were trying to address. And it all began from there. But slow and steady, the more we studied, the more we realized that there's so much more to talk about it, whether it's hygiene, whether it's responsibility, whether simple topics like consent, respect, puberty, teenage and their hormones. There's so much that menopause. So there is so much that we started realizing that this sex education was less about sex and more about educating a person all about the person's sexual being.
They differ as per age groups. So just to sum up what you said, if I got it right, so for preteens, for example, we have our for starting from toddlers, we have around, safe touch, unsafe touch. Then for preteens, we have kind of what happens in puberty, what are the changes, what is the importance of those changes. Then for teenagers, it is like that, what are your genitals? What are the importance of your genitals? What are wet dreams for boys, for example? Then what are contraceptives? Just an introduction to that. And as they move on to their final journey of being the right adults, then of course the right decisions, when to take the right decisions, what are the right decisions, what are the consequences of those decisions, what are the do's and don'ts of a relationship. I think all these come under sexuality education, which is generally with all the, I would say, not only Indians, I would say, but other people in the country also, they take sex education as the education to how to have an intercourse, whereas it is not that. It is much more about the body, what are the changes in the body, and how to deal with different situations related to your body.
In fact, I have had friends and a lot of people on social media telling me that, what do you teach about something that is so intuitive? Why do you have to teach about sex and how people should have sex? And I'm like, I don't teach how to have sex or how to make love. I teach you what goes around it. I teach you to identify what are your likes and dislikes. I teach you to say no if you're uncomfortable. I tell you what your responsibilities are, you know, those kind of things. Yeah. So it's as good as, will a child not know how to eat when it's hungry? Of course, it's going to go grab food and put it in the mouth. But what is the right way of doing it? Why do you need to chew? Why do you need to sit down patiently and calmly and eat your food? That is what goes around teaching a child the right way to eat your food. Similarly, sexuality education is not just about the act of sex, which is like probably a one-liner if I really have to teach somebody, you know, but it's everything around it that we need to teach people.
Yeah, and that too at the right age. That too.
Absolutely. So like you said, you know, if masturbation is a topic, will I talk about it to a 10-year-old? Yes, I would. But I would speak it in a very age-appropriate manner. I would speak it with context. Not something like, okay, sit down, I want to talk to you about something today. So usually how you approach a topic is extremely important. All the moral values come up for a teacher. Then why not? Then why this? Then why not like that? Why society takes us? Like, you know, there are so many questions a child can have. So age appropriateness is extremely important, and having a context around the topic is important. Now, that same topic for an adult, I will deal with it differently. Yeah. So it's very, very age appropriate also.
Agreed, completely. So I think that quite a bit answers my second question, which I had thought of asking, that what is the right age of starting sexuality education, I would say, for the kids, and what actually are the things to be taken care while imparting that education. You very well answered that actually. Yeah,
in fact, I have a little more to add to this question particularly, because we all look at it as a age-wise thing to do, you know, at what age do I start? So I would say there is no particular age to talk about sexuality. So would I talk about gender identity to a 7-year-old? I would. Would I talk about gender identity to a 70-year-old? I would. So, you know, there's no particular age as such, but they also depending on the sexual development, as I was saying. So, for example, if now my daughter is 11, so slow and steady, I will start talking about what attraction means, what is a crush, what is an infatuation, what actually love means. Now that you're growing up, these are the things that will come across to you in a couple of years. I will prepare my child for what is going to come next in her life. All right. So one, definitely start as early as possible, because I think our attitude as parents also, when our child is a toddler, the child is learning from what they see rather than what they hear. So if a toddler watches you being gender neutral, being fair and just, being equal to both the genders or all genders for that matter, as somebody who is teaching them the hygiene around their genitals, very open to talk about topics, already you're teaching a child to be okay with it, about themselves and about sexuality. So one is start as early as possible. 2, it can be just before your child is reaching a sexual development. 3, when they ask you questions. So maybe you think it is not the right time to teach a child about sex per se, but your child might just come and ask you, how did this child get into this auntie's tummy? The parent usually starts thinking like, oh, how do I talk about sex here? But you don't have to. You can still have the reference depending on the child's age and say something like, you know how animals lay their eggs outside in the nest? The woman lays eggs inside her body in a very special bag. And that's where the child grows. And as the child grows, the auntie's tummy keeps growing out. And when the child comes out, the tummy will go back in. A simple something like that is also teaching the child, because that child has questioned you. And especially in today's times, if you don't answer, Google is right there to answer it for them. So avoid that, avoid that.
That curiosity. Yeah.
Yes. And the last is when they comment on something or they react to something. So kissing scenes are a very common scenario in today's media, television media or print media. If they see something like that and they react to it, whether good or bad, it's your opportunity to talk to them about how physically also one can express feelings. It could be a feeling of love. It could be a feeling of simple friendship. It could be feelings of, different anger, and how kiss and what does it mean. So these are the opportunities. These are the 4 things that I tell, everybody who asks me, when do I start sex educating? So there's no particular when, but these are the 4 particularly time or situations, I would say, where you should and you must talk to your children, or even your friends and colleagues and your partner also, for that matter, on sex education. Thank you so much for having me also. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Niyatii. The pleasure was all completely yours. Thank you so much.